Hi, I'm Arthur. And today, we talk about one of the few legions I actually knew a little bit about before doing my research on them. Ah, yes. The chaotic Coomer of all the legions, and in my humble opinion, the one that fell the hardest by far. It depends on where your morals are, but today we are finally discussing the first Chaos Legion, the Emperor's Children. So what do I mean when I say they fell the hardest? They were perched atop the highest peak and fell so far from where they originally were that they are not even a shell of what they once were. No sense of nobility, no camaraderie, quite literally just depravity. But before we get ahead of ourselves and talk about how they snort ground up Tyranid adrenal glands off the ass of some random Slaaneshi demon, we have to know where they kinda got started. So to set the stage, I want you to imagine a bastion of perfection. A group of warriors that are so perfectly aligned to the idea of martial prowess that it almost seems unnatural even by Space Marine standards. Then, I want you to imagine them having the fucking worst luck imaginable, as well as terrible judgment skills. Yeah. That's what the Emperor's Children were like. The bad luck for them comes in several stages, all revolving around losing gene seed, pissing the wrong people off, and plagues/blights of varying sizes and degree. It's a bit pedantic to go into every step, so to put it into perspective, I got a few people correcting me in the comments of my Dark Angels video. Rightly so. I'd rather have the facts straight, but what I was corrected on the most was that the Dark Angels weren't 100,000 strong. They were closer to somewhere between like 200,000 and 300,000, which is insane to think about in the 40k era of things, considering each Space Marine chapter is only supposed to be like 1,000 Marines, and the biggest chapter that I think we have out there right now is the Black Templars, and they're considered like an unstoppable killing force at 6,000 Marines. So with that in mind, then you have the Emperor's Children, which, due to a blight that wiped out most of their legion, technically it was culled to get rid of the infected gene seed, but whatever. The Third Legion was technically left off with, I think the record stated, less than 500 Marines total before they found their Primarch. There were so few Marines in their ranks that they couldn't serve as a legion. They had to operate with other larger legions as well as human military forces. That's what they were before they found the Primarch. So where was their Primarch? That, as most things are, is simple and also incredibly needlessly complicated. The simple answer is some shitty resource-poor mining planet named Chemos. Though that isn't the whole story. The short end of the complicated bit is that an Eldar meme god switched the places of Fulgrim, the Primarch of the 3rd Legion, and Jagatai Khan, the Primarch of the 5th Legion. Probably just for a laugh. I should say that it was only allegedly the Eldar meme god, but come on, it totally was. There's like maybe 2 other people that could have done it. But yes, Fulgrim was sent to Chemos, a planet known for its lacking creativity, and much like 90% of the planet's Primarchs land on, he immediately made improvements. Chemos was such a rancid shithole of a planet, people had no free time. If you didn't work, you basically didn't get to eat. And if you really didn't work, they would probably grind you up into corpse starch for rations. Fulgrim, using his Primarch genius, was able to improve all the tech and unite the whole planet, inevitably becoming the king of everything forever on this planet. He also made it so that everyone could afford to have like pastimes and hobbies other than work, which I always thought was interesting. See, from my philosophical point of view, if you take out the necessities of life and meet the needs of the person, they would likely pursue creative endeavors. Because I like to think that humanity as a whole tends to lean towards the recreational, creative aspects of life rather than just the strictly mechanical, get the job done for immediate physical improvement or like situational improvement. I just think it's nice that his goal was to allow people the ability to pursue things other than just working in a mineshaft and dying of rust lung at the ripe old age of 14. Once he was crowned forever king of Chemos, his real dad showed up, took him in, and immediately put him in charge of his tiny legion, which, if I remember correctly, he was incredibly insecure about. Yeah, Fulgrim is kind of the whiny bitch Primarch. I get it. Seeing all his brothers have these massive legions made him a little obsessed about how he could outperform them, or at least be a little bit shinier. Though these emotions were tempered by having him serve side by side with his brother Horus, which, the sentence, side by side with his brother Horus, is going to be a bit of a sentence that ages like a fine milk. So, him serving with Horus, because, as I mentioned before, his 300-strong, 500-strong legion, as they were recovering numbers, had to serve aside larger legions. So, he was just working with that legion, and he ended up making a friendship with Horus. Fulgrim, if I remember correctly, wasn't the most well-liked Primarch, but he still had friends amongst the other Primarchs. Notably Horus, of course, and Ferrus Manus, which is... holy moly. That's sad. That's really sad. Skipping ahead a bit, he made a friend with a robot man, as I mentioned, and his robot army. Finally breaks off from the Luna Wolves, goes to do his own thing, yada yada yada, and we end up at the most significant moment in the Legion's history according to me. And you're watching my video, so you kind of have to assume that I'm right. And that moment is when they found the fucking snake people, the lair. Slaaneshi cults can take many forms, but snake people is just a bit on the nose. Space Marines did as Space Marines do, and absolutely obliterated them to the last man, finding an ancient temple. It was an ancient lair temple that was erected for their rituals, and all those of the Astartes and Fulgrim whom entered that temple were damned from then on forth. A curse clung to their armor like a foul stench to rotting meat. Fulgrim found a cursed sword, the Lair Blade, which is good job, writers. The Lair Blade, the sword he found from... And the Legion discovered the power of using Xenotech as well as body modification. Vocal cords that can scream so loud they can burst a person's head, bigger, stronger muscles, tendrils, you name it. The chief apothecary of the Legion, Fabius Bile, would do pretty much anything to improve his Legion as well as advance his studies, which, as you could guess, inevitably led to more and more depraved changes. That's where they were before. Where are they now? It is unquestionably depressing where they are now. They are a legion divided by their own obsession. Possessed by their urges, they are now a legion dedicated to Slaanesh, the pleasure god. There are 4 legions in total that were each chaos dedicated, meaning there was one for each god. There were a few that were kind of generalist and went to the chaos gods or just decided to become their own secessionist faction. The Night Lords are weird like that. But these Marines, the Emperor's Children, were the ones that were dedicated specifically to Slaanesh. Currently, they are just doing what they do, finding new combat stims, new drugs made to make their bodies push harder and harder. Their leaders are raving madmen. They lost all their sense of elegance, they lost all their sense of nobility, and in its place is just unabashed and simple decadence, passing fancy, a twisted version of the ideologies of Fulgrim when he added pastimes and art to Chemos, just cranked up to the extreme. And Fulgrim, he gave up his mortality and is now a demon prince obsessed with his own vainglory. He is now simply a puppet of Slaanesh. The Emperor's Children are just a minor faction in the lore right now in comparison to other Chaos Legions. It is one of the most depressing fates imaginable in the 40k universe. But what if I told you there was a chance that they could come back? Not just as a Chaos faction, but as something else. There was an accident in lore. Something that happened without anyone knowing how it did. Fabius Bile was, as I mentioned before, the chief apothecary of the Emperor's Children back in the pre-Horus Heresy and Heresy days. He's still alive today, I'll go into how the warp affects time at a later date, but essentially, he's thousands of years old and fundamentally immortal through his own means, but he does constant experimentation on genetics, genes, and clones specifically. Cloning a Primarch does not make another Primarch. There's something special about their creation. People kind of relatively describe it as destiny, where if a Primarch has destiny on them, that means they're like protected. It's basically the fancy word of saying plot armor. So one day, in one of his clone vats, he created a perfect clone of Fulgrim, which I'm pretty sure he's done before, but this one was special as it had portions of Fulgrim's soul in it. When Fulgrim, the original one, turned into a Chaos Demon, his soul was forfeit. He had to give up the majority of it to Slaanesh, but people theorize that whatever wasn't given up was cast into the void, because there's a lot of Primarchs that actually happened. This soul somehow managed up in what I will refer to as Clonegrim from now on, and this Clonegrim has the same mentalities and ideologies as Fulgrim before the Layer Blade. So this is like a loyalist Fulgrim. The idea of a loyalist Emperor's Children becoming a thing in the modern setting with like Primaris Marines and shit, that is so fucking cool that I would probably take out a loan to get yet another Space Marine army just to get it. But I shall say that is a bit of a pipe dream. Where we are at in the lore right now is that Fulgrim is sulking somewhere after losing to Guilliman. There was a plot to put a Slaaneshi ultimate corruption crown on his head, and he fucked that up. I don't think he was involved in the 13th Black Crusade that just fucking ended. He might get involved in the Arcs of Omen, which are going on right now, but I don't know. Fabius Bile is now the Clone Master, and he traded that clone of Fulgrim, Clonegrim, to some ancient Xeno collector who has this massive museum named Trazian. He wants to collect rare objects and people, put them in stasis, and just have them there to view for people. So, Clonegrim is there. And the only remaining Heresy and pre-Heresy era champion that I can remember is still kind of fucking around is Lucius. And that warp crackhead is probably out there licking batteries for fun. God, I hate Lucius. So, it's an interesting place to be, because I have a feeling that in 10th edition Warhammer, one or all of these individuals is going to start making power plays. I mean, it's almost guaranteed, because if you know how the game has been going, we've got Mortarion for the Death Guard, we've got Magnus for the Thousand Suns, we've got Angron, who's coming out right now. So there's only like one guy left. It'd be kind of funny if they did like a sidestep and we're like, here's Perturabo. I'd be like, oh yeah, hell yeah, I love Perturabo. Needless to say, they're probably going to cover Slaanesh, and then they're going to release like a new Lucius model, Fulgrim, and I'm hoping my pipe dream is Emperor's Children versus Emperor's Children box, but like Primaris Marines versus Chaos Marines. That'd be so cool. When that happens, I need to cover it because I'm actually like invested in Clonegrim. But until then, remember to like, comment, and subscribe for more of my weird 40k witticisms, because next week we are going to be covering the 4th Legion, the Bitter Marines, aka the Iron Warriors. Until then, remember, don't trust snake people, or you may end up like Lucius, and everybody fucking hates that dick.